Okay. So what's your question?
Oh, the question is, what is the state of defiance, as it was called? Maybe if the idea has evolved since then, the state of defiance to reverse the setbacks of 2022, help us get back to balanced status in 2024.
So the state of defiance is something that Duane has been working on. When he gets on, he can tell a little bit more about it because that's where the idea originated. As many libertarians who are involved are aware, the ballot access thresholds were increased from 50,000 votes, which Larry Sharp got in 2018, to which he got over 95,000 votes. And it was increased to 130,000 votes or 2%, whichever was higher. And then, of course, in 2020, Joe Jorgensen got over 60,000 votes, which was enough for the old thresholds. But because we had the new thresholds of 130,000 or 2%, we were short. And we would have needed 2%. It would have been something around 170,000. So all the parties except for the Republican, Democrat, Working Families, and Conservative Party were gone. And of course, we've been in ballot access litigation ever since. Yesterday, we just filed to have our case heard by the Supreme Court. With that said, we entered 2022 with, in addition to those vote thresholds, we had an increase of signatures. So normally an independent body would need 15,000 signatures to get on the ballot, and it's been like that for most of the time since the 1930s. There was a period of time where it was 20,000 signatures, but it's been 15,000 for the most recent elections. That's what we did in 2016, and that's what we did in 2018. 2016, we got more than double, over 30,000 signatures for Gary Johnson, and in 2018, we got over 30,000 signatures for Larry Sharp. However, with the increase from 15,000 to 45,000, which also, in addition to that triple, we need to have a certain number of signatures from half of the congressional districts. So that was increased from 100 signatures from half of the congressional districts to over 500. So that was quintupled. In addition to that, because of the MOVE Act, they've moved primaries and petitioning period from, we would normally petition during the summer when there were festivals going on, there were fairs, it was a lot of people were out and about. You know, you could get a lot of petition signatures in July and August, but it was moved, and the petitioning period is now in March and April and May, which is much harder. There aren't as much festivals out because it's not summer. And of course, we are also coming out of COVID as well. So there was a lot of factors that made it really difficult. On top of that, they tripled the number of signatures, but they kept the 6-week period to get signatures, the 42-day period, which and it was one of the points in our lawsuit that it's 1,071 signatures per day, which is the highest in the nation. And so with that said, we went into 2022. Larry got over 42,000 signatures filed, which was actually more signatures than Lee Zeldin, if you take away his fraudulent photocopies. He's a sitting congressman and the Republican nominee. He got less raw signatures than Larry. And then Harry Wilson, who's a millionaire, he didn't even get 30,000, and he was also going for it. So even though there were several parties that attempted it and would have made it over the 15,000, even Larry Sharp beat establishment candidates, millionaires, just showing that it's an impossible feat. And so then that's where we're at. You know, we didn't get on the ballot for the first time since our beginning. We didn't run a candidate in 1986, but that was the first time we attempted and didn't get on there. So when we headed into that, of course, morale was low. You know, what are we going to do? We didn't want to get candidates on the ballot. We had ballot access before. And that's where Duane and I started thinking about shifting strategy. And there were several other people that we had talked to as well about shifting strategy. Looking at the way the Libertarian Party, which celebrated its 50th anniversary recently, and kind of looking back into what we've done in the past and what we've kind of focused on, we've kind of treated it as if the party was one of the big parties where, you know, Republicans, Democrats, they just got to go out there, you know, and get signatures. And, you know, they have a machine. They have county committees. They have town committees. They have, you know, they'll get their signatures by just passing it at each of their meetings, whereas third parties were much smaller. And of course, we have all the hurdles that they even prevent us to get on the ballot. In addition to that, they're reliant on the political class. They have the power, they have the money, they have the government jobs program, and that's something that is another hurdle to do that. So, with regard to electoral wins, of course, we want to get libertarians elected, but we first need to establish a foundation that we can kind of beat them in not their arena. The Democrats and Republicans arena is, get candidates on the ballot, go on campaigning, get out the vote. And so we were thinking of strategies, and Duane's done some of this in Western New York and the Buffalo area. What can we do that's not necessarily running candidates for electoral, that's going to show us having wins, making some progress to bring in supporters, donors, and so on. And so that's where the idea of the State of Defiance agenda comes in. Just taking this shift, saying, if we want to have electoral wins in the future, we need this foundation, we need grassroots, we need some wins. I see Duane's here. I'd like to maybe turn it over to him where he can actually go into, why we want to shift the strategy to a defiance agenda and how that will long-term eventually get us to ballot access.
Duane, we can see you. Are you able to be heard?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey guys. Perfect. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, Colstee, I kind of got in late, so I heard what you were saying, but what questions do you want me to answer? What do you want me to talk about? And I'll get right into it.
So, Duane, I was just talking about how, what the hurdles we've had where we had the lower petitioning count before we got candidates on the ballot. And just because of 2022, the electoral process that's, against us because of the political class and the jobs program.
Yes.
And we're just kind of acting like we're the major parties when we have to find another strategy. We can't play the game they are.
Yes.
We have to play a different strategy. So that's what I was kind of going for when we're talking about this, using the State of Defiance strategy to do that.
Perfect. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to rehash too much of what Colstee said, but I got involved in 2018. Larry Sharp did a very good job kind of doing a lot of the work. He got us ballot access. He got the petitions. He got the votes. It was easy. And then the two major parties have two underling parties. The GOP controls the Conservative Party, and the Dems kind of control the Working Families Party. So that's kind of their foray into, quote, third parties, where they can say, oh, well, there's a third party that's on the left, there's a third party that's on the right, but really they're all controlled by us. So it's a facade of free choice. It's a facade of having a fair election, but really they're controlled. That's why more often than not, the Conservatives cross-endorse Republicans, Working Families cross-endorse Dems. 2018, the SAM Party, Libertarian Party, Green Party have ballot access, and you'll see increasing resistance to government. You see people having a lack of trust in government. You see people kind of realizing that the government and central power is a failure and is failing, especially in a state like New York. So New York realized that they had to figure out a way to keep the facade of fair and free elections while controlling who could win. And so they had these minor parties, the Green Party, us, and the SAM Party. SAM Party was a short-term flash in the pan. It kind of got wiped out. But the Libertarians and Greens were seen as enemies because we weren't really cross-endorsing. We were kind of our own ideology, our own mindset. And so they made it harder. And we lost ballot access in 2020. And so I realized that, we can sit here and sue in the courts that are controlled by the state. We can, argue, but really what it boils down to is we need people. We need a movement. And I saw that the LP for the longest time tried to kind of go through the motions as a political party. But like Colstee said, the LP, the greatest example of what I'm about to say is the Buffalo mayoral race with Byron Brown winning a write-in race. The political class controls the Republican and Democratic parties. There's a lot of jobs, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of funding, and there's a lot of power at stake that the Libertarians and Greens don't have. All the, look at the Board of Elections, the Water Authority, maintenance jobs, teaching jobs. They're all politically connected in some way. We control none of those. So Byron Brown, he lost his primary against India Walton, who's a more progressive lefty than he is, in Buffalo for the city of Buffalo mayoral race. And Byron Brown essentially went to everyone he appointed in the Buffalo Jobs Program and said, hey, you like your job? I need to win. You got your job because of me. And so they turned out, they essentially said, I need to campaign. I need to work. I need to show up, because if Byron Brown doesn't win, my job is at stake. Libertarians don't have that. Most of us work for ourselves, or, we've got jobs that aren't politically connected. So, we have our own stuff to take care of. If our candidates lose, no one's losing their job. No one's going without. So there's a lot of power and money at stake to prevent the Libertarians from gaining traction. So the Republicans, Democrats, they're not going to work with us. We're not their friends. We're not their allies. And so realizing that, I said, well, it's time for a shift of the Overton window of what a political party should be doing. And, I can't say, hey, Joe Smith, give me $10,000 if I win, Kathy Hochul with the weed legalization, or Kathy Hochul with Delaware North. Hey, Delaware North, donate to me. The Pagulas, donate to Kathy Hochul. Hey, you're going to get $1 billion of taxpayer subsidies to build the new stadium. Hey, Delaware North, donate to me. Oh, we're going to rip the Senecas off and, do stuff like that. We don't have that ability, and we're not like that anyways. We don't have the corruption issue that the two parties have. So we don't have the power or influence programs that the two parties have. So realizing that there's a huge issue in distrust of government is essentially failing at what it does, I believe we can get people who are willing to put time and effort in to dismantle that through essentially the defiance agenda, which is not necessarily challenging their authority, but just ignoring their authority exists in the first place. And finding the people who are so burnt out, frustrated, and fed up, and kind of put them under the umbrella of this, quote, defiance agenda, which is, we're challenging their authority to an extent, but really we're just going to say whatever Albany wants to pass. If people don't comply with it, if people don't listen to it, if we propagandize the enforcement arm to not enforce it, it doesn't exist. The SAFE Act was a great example of this. New York State Governor Cuomo passed the SAFE Act, and 97% of gun owners did not comply, and they had no counter to that. We're doing it with the natural gas. The natural gas ban and stuff is working with localities not to enforce it. If they pass the law, it doesn't get enforced. Well, what's the point of the law? And it's just kind of shifting the Overton window from just running candidates, getting 1%, losing, to essentially an educational reform, an educational program to get people to follow a movement that understands that central government, central planning isn't necessarily the solution to all our problems.
I want to say that it sounds like another way of saying the consent of the governed. We can take advantage of examples of being set upon by new laws and more government to create concrete examples of people demonstrating that they do not consent to this form or that form of tyranny. And we need to just go over what was said in the first part of this. But in terms of just quick notes, I just wanted to make, there's an issue of transparency that came up over the year with the events of the campaign, where we found out at one point in the year almost nothing. After I'm saying that from the point of view of somebody outside, who until very recently was outside of the party apparatus, officially back on the state committee now. But I wondered, well, what happened to the petition drive? Why weren't certain petitioners in communication with the candidate or the campaign enough? What happened to the logistics of the campaign that there was not enough communication to know what the totals were in terms of petitions, signatures, and what was going on? And normally the party, if nothing else, the members knew what was going on, And that sort of radio silence, as I described it at the time, probably had something to do with the lack of success we experienced. The other quick reflection is one of, I felt we've been overconfident as a party over the years about the ability to get anywhere with legal strategies or going to court over things. We get some victories here and there, and once in a while a big one. Most of the time, we start out very optimistic about how we're supposed to win because we've got all the merits behind us and everything. And then we find out the court system and the appeal system doesn't want to believe that, and just want to rule the way it wants to rule. I hope for the best regarding the appeal to the Supreme Court on the matter of this current legal matter, but I'm not overconfident about it based on the past history. Is there something you can say about the probability or the likelihood of success with the strategies you just mentioned? It can go to Duane or it can go to Andrew.
Andrew, you want to go first, or you want me to go first? Because
what specifically? Yeah, because you had a lot there. You were talking about the petition drive. You were talking about the court cases. What specific question are you asking?
Well, what's the communication between the campaign and petitioners?
Do you want me to cover the Sharp campaign, the petitioning campaign, what happened?
Well,
I mean, I won't go too much.
You don't have to go into the details. Just
I can answer that really simply. As I was the second vice chair for a term during petitioning, and the questions you asked were the same ones I had as leadership of the LPNY. There wasn't a lot of transparency. There wasn't a lot of communication. I knew a little bit more because I could figure it out. But there was a lack of transparency and a lack of communication. And I got to be careful what I say. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I feel like certain things were said certain ways. So to keep people still doing the work, if that makes sense. I think pretty quickly into petitioning, we knew we were very, very short, but publicly things were said differently to not discourage people to not keep going. That's what I think. I wasn't involved. Unfortunately, some of our better people in Western New York sat on the sidelines and watched because there were issues. As far as why it happened, part of the reason why I believe in the Defiance agenda and building the movement is because of why it happened. It didn't happen on purpose. Some things didn't happen on purpose, but generally, one of the big issues we had was we had a lot of work that needed to be done and not a lot of people willing to step up and do it. And so it became a scramble, and a lot of work was put on a lot of people who had families, who had jobs, who had careers, who had other things going on. And I looked at petitioning in 22 and realized that we don't have the resources and the manpower to do a successful 45,000 signature drive. And to make it even further than that, neither did the Green Party. Even Lee Zeldin failed to get 45,000 on his independent line, and so did multimillionaire Harry Wilson couldn't get it. So we weren't the only ones experiencing the problem. The difference is, I think we see a solution to solve that problem in the future, and the other parties kind of don't have that. Yeah, petitioning was a train wreck, and that's kind of why I pushed back and came up with this idea of building this foundational movement, because, when it's 15,000 signatures, look, 10 people can get 1,000 signatures and you're almost halfway of what you need. When it's 45,000, you need a lot more people. You need a lot more foundations in place, and you need a lot more teamwork and a lot more group effort. And I think that there was a lot of reliance and belief. Larry kept saying he had a plan, he got it. He had a plan, he got it. You knew what he was going to do, what's going to be fine. And then the nomination convention came in February, and he didn't have it. And now we're 2 months before petitioning and we're scrambling for candidates. We didn't have a slate. I'm trying to be polite because I don't want to publicly insult or put anyone down, but we relied on someone to have a plan. We were told they had a plan. And then when it came time to hear the plan, there was no plan.
Okay.
And so we were scrambling. And that's why I'm very adamant that we don't petition in 24 on a serious, resource gathering and resource expending mission, because I don't foresee 24 as a way to get on the ballot. I don't think we're going to get 25,000 signatures. We have just over a year to have a foundation and plan in place, and I don't think we're there. And that's why I think, we're not quitting, we're not giving up. We're kind of retreating and gathering our resources and taking stock in what we have and saying, all right, let's build a foundation, let's build the movement, and let's take a strong foundation, a strong plan of attack into 2026.
I just want to add one other question about this. In the past, when we've had problems with past petition drives, or we were on the edge of succeeding or failing, what somebody would do is execute a contingency plan where you bring in extra amount of extra people at crunch time, maybe like 2 weeks to go, and they do extra petition work that get us over the hump, whereas the current numbers with the current people working on the drive were not going to get us there. Did that happen or didn't happen this time? I mean,
I can.
Colstee,
Yeah,
I
I can.
that.
Yeah, I can. I mean, I was there in the room when we were binding the petitions. But yeah, a lot of what Duane said was it was true. It was the first time it was 45,000 signatures. The only time that I've seen the Libertarian Party of New York got over that amount was in 1980 during the Clark campaign. But that was back when there was a lot of money coming in there. But we did not have as much of a volunteer effort. We had about half the number of volunteer signatures than we did in 2018. 2018, we had about 18,000 volunteer signatures. 2022, we had about 9,000 volunteer signatures. Of course, a lot of that had to do with COVID really took a hit. Joe Jorgensen had trouble campaigning, getting into New York. And, the focus went into the major parties where the LP was, kind of in a sort of kind of a soul searching, which I think it still is. There was a lot of controversy over the Reno convention and the direction of the party. And I think the party as a whole is soul searching our strategy. And we're just trying to develop new elements. When it came to the petitioning drive, I think there's certainly a lot of blame that could be going around. We could sit here all day and point fingers. But I think the blame can be spread on pretty much everyone. It could have been a lot more organized. You ask if there was a effort at the end to, sort of pick things up. We did not know. The first time we knew how many signatures we had was when I came back from Albany and Duane and I counted the signatures on the scan. That was the first time we knew. We did not know up until that. In years past, we knew how many signatures we had. So if we were short, we could push it. And I know people were upset because they said, "Oh, I thought we had it." Larry said we had well over 50,000 signatures. We're good.
Yep.
And I think we had turned. The difference this time is we had sort of the LPNY, and I kind of warned against this. Is one of the reasons, I ran for chair and Duane and I want to kind of push in a different direction, because, I was secretary at the time of this petition drive and I questioned how things were going. And the LPNY has typically run the drives before. This was a case where it pretty much got entirely delegated to the candidate and the candidates committee, which was already short-staffed, and they were already struggling. It was a big mounting task. So, and and of course we had to rely a lot on paid petitioners. National promised us $30,000. We didn't get 15,000 until the end. We got the other 15,000 later. Just it was not a good situation overall, and I could go on and on and on. But I think, as much as the problems we had in 2022, I think we learned a whole lot about where this party is and what we need to do to sort of shift if we want to not run the hamster wheel. It's they increase the thresholds, and we also even talk like, well, what if we win the lawsuit? Or there is legislation that has been introduced to reduce the signature count back down and the thresholds back down. But I mean, even if that happens, or say we get 50,000, 60,000 signatures, we get on the ballot, what's stopping the legislature or the governor from pushing it in a budget bill in the future, from raising the thresholds? We always talk about they push the goalpost, they could push it again. And we would just, because we knew we hit a ceiling as far as where our resources and our energy are at. And of course, as a third party, we're already disadvantaged because Hochul needed 0 signatures to get on the ballot on the Democratic line, and Zeldin needed 0 signatures to get on the ballot for the Republican line because they're established party. So we're already starting off on a disadvantage with the increased thresholds and increased advantage. And knowing that our resources and our strategy didn't work, we had to say, okay, this is not working. We can't just run the hamster wheel. And some people are talking about, okay, well, let's try again in 2024. But Duane and I and several others are looking at this like, experiencing 2022, we realized that, in a voluntary organization, we don't have paid staff like the others.
Right.
So it's going to take a while to
program either.
We don't have the jobs program. I mean, it'd be great if somebody donated $200,000. We could hire a couple staff. They could implement, get our infrastructure going. But it's going to take a while to get that infrastructure going so we can build the Defiance agenda, do the strategies that Duane is talking about, and then move forward to grow our base, grow our donors, grow our supporters, start targeting local races, getting our brand out there. But if we focus on a petitioning drive in 2024, instead of building for a long term, we're just going to get burned out. We're going to get hit again in 2024. And post 2024 is going to be, the same thing, probably worse. And I know Larry Sharpe is talking a lot about, we if we just had a third party in New York, we could gather all those third party votes because they're he's right. There were, if you combine the Libertarian vote and Independence Party votes and, Green Party votes and anyone who didn't vote major party, and if the Libertarian Party was the only third party on, we could gather a lot of the sort of anti-two party votes. But to do that is gonna take a lot, and we really want to set ourselves up for long-term strategy, a long-term success, as opposed to this hamster wheel. Well, we've always run a petition drive. We've always run a candidate. It's going to take about $500,000 to get on the ballot, or minimum to get on the ballot, and then to get ballot access to get the vote out for 130,000 or 2%. It's going to take a lot more.